All right, everybody, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at some engine stressing habits.
Absolutely.
And this is based off an article called Engine Stressing Habits Avoiding Costly Car Repairs.
Yeah.
And I got to say, some of these were really surprising to me.
Yeah, fascinating how many of these things people do every day without realizing it.
Yeah, and how much they can damage their engines.
Exactly.
For instance, did you know that driving at low RPMs all the time can actually be bad for your car?
Yeah, it's counterintuitive. You'd think that keeping the revs down would save wear and tear, but
Yeah.
there's a concept called lugging the engine.
Lugging the engine.
Yeah, it's when you're driving at a low RPM and putting a heavy load on the engine. Like when you're accelerating up a hill or you're towing a trailer.
So it's not just about the RPM, it's about how hard the engine's working at that RPM.
Yeah, exactly. At low RPMs, the oil pump and the water pump spin slower.
Oh.
And that can lead to lower oil pressure and less effective cooling.
Oh, right, because those things are connected to the engine speed. Okay, so driving at low RPMs all the time under load can cause wear and tear. But I mean, like in traffic, sometimes it's unavoidable to be at a low RPM.
Yeah, of course. Modern engines are designed to handle some degree of low RPM operation.
Yeah.
What we're talking about here is consistently driving at very low RPMs when the engine's under a heavy load.
Right.
That's what causes the damage.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better about my commute, which is sometimes very slow.
Sure.
How do you even know if you're lugging the engine? Like, are there warning signs that your engine is giving you?
Yeah, you might feel the engine vibrating or shuddering more than usual.
No.
You might hear a knocking or a pinging sound.
Okay, so it's not just about the gauges. It's about feeling and hewing what the engine's telling you.
Exactly. You gotta listen to your car.
All right, listen to your car, everybody. So another habit that I think we've all probably heard mixed reviews on is engine braking.
Yeah.
Some people say it's bad for your car. Other people say it's fine to do.
Yeah.
What's the deal with engine braking?
Well, engine braking can be useful in certain situations,
Right,
like
right.
when you're descending a long, steep hill.
Okay.
By downshifting to a lower gear, you can use the engine's compression to slow down the vehicle, and that takes some of the wear and tear off your brakes.
Yeah.
And it helps prevent your brakes from overheating, which is important if you're towing a trailer.
Right. Especially like going down a mountain or something.
Exactly.
But why do people say it's bad for your transmission?
The problem isn't engine braking itself, it's how you do it. If you downshift too aggressively or you downshift into too low of a gear, you can cause the engine to over-rev.
Oh.
And that can put stress on both the engine and the transmission.
So it's all about doing it gradually and smoothly.
Yeah, you want to match the engine speed to the vehicle speed as seamlessly as possible.
Okay. So engine braking, good if you do it right.
Right.
Bad if you do it wrong.
Exactly.
Another thing that I've definitely been guilty of in the past, especially on cold mornings, is revving the engine to warm it up.
Yeah.
Is that bad?
You know, I think we've all done that.
Yeah.
But it's important to understand why it's so detrimental.
Yeah.
When the engine oil is cold, it's very thick.
Yeah.
And it doesn't flow easily.
Right.
It makes it difficult for the oil to circulate quickly and lubricate all the vital engine components.
Oh, so it's not actually getting to where it needs to be
Exactly.
when you first start the car.
And that can lead to increased friction and wear on the engine parts.
And I imagine the metal being cold is probably not good either.
That's a great point. When metal is cold, it contracts, so the tolerances are tighter,
Right.
and that just adds to the friction problem.
So how long should we let our cars warm up?
Well, you know, a lot of people look at the temperature gauge, but that's really just measuring the coolant temperature. The oil takes longer to warm up.
Oh.
So even if the gauge is reading normal, the oil might not be fully up to temperature.
Okay. So even if the gauge says it's okay, it might not really be okay.
Right.
So you're saying we should just let it idle for a few minutes before we actually start driving?
Yeah. And avoid hard acceleration until the engine is fully warmed up.
Okay, so no, like, racing off to work on a cold morning.
Exactly.
All right. Something else that I think is really interesting is this idea of high gear acceleration.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't it better to, like, accelerate in a higher gear because it saves fuel?
It is more fuel efficient at cruising speeds.
Yeah.
But when you accelerate hard in a high gear, you're actually putting a lot of stress on the engine and transmission.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the engine has to work much harder to overcome the inertia of the vehicle.
Right.
And that creates a lot of torque, which can put strain on the components.
Oh, so it's almost like moving a heavy object from a standstill using, like, just your arms.
Yeah.
You're going to hurt yourself.
And over time, that can lead to premature wear and tear on the engine.
But I mean, aren't modern engines designed to handle like a little bit more spirited driving?
They are.
Yeah.
Occasional bursts of acceleration aren't going to ruin your engine. But if you're constantly flooring it, especially in a high gear, you are increasing the risk of problems.
Okay, so a little bit's fine, but you shouldn't make it a habit.
Exactly.
All right. Let's move on to something that maybe is a little less exciting, but still very important, and that's fluid leaks.
Right.
I think we all know that fluid leaks are bad, but can you break down like the different types of fluids and why it's bad if they leak?
Sure. So let's start with coolant.
Okay.
Coolant is responsible for regulating the engine temperature, and if you have a coolant leak, that can lead to overheating.
And we already talked about why overheating's bad.
Yeah, exactly. Even a small coolant leak should be addressed promptly.
Okay, so we don't want to ignore that.
Yeah.
What about an oil leak?
Oil leaks can also lead to major engine damage,
Okay.
and they can even create a fire hazard if the oil drips onto a hot surface.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Now, brake fluid,
Aye.
that's essential for your braking system, and a leak can significantly reduce your braking ability.
Right, big safety concern. And transmission fluid?
Transmission fluid leaks can cause all sorts of problems, from slipping gears to complete transmission failure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So basically any kind of fluid leak is bad news.
Yeah, any type of fluid leak should be taken seriously and addressed promptly.
And so now we're going to move on to ignoring overheating.
Right.
I mean, obviously we should never ignore overheating,
Okay.
but what causes an engine to overheat in the first place?
Well, there are a number of things that can cause an engine to overheat.
Okay.
It could be a faulty thermostat,
Uh-huh.
a clogged radiator, a broken water pump, or even a problem with the head gasket.
So it's not always just about the coolant level.
Right. It could be a more serious underlying mechanical issue.
And what are the consequences of ignoring overheating?
If you ignore overheating, it can cause serious damage to your engine.
Yeah.
You can warp the cylinder heads, damage the piston rings, and even crack the engine block.
Oh, wow. That sounds expensive.
It can be very expensive.
And even if it's not like catastrophic right away, it can still shorten the lifespan of your engine.
Exactly.
All right. Let's move on to something that I think is a little bit more situational, but can still be really bad. And that's driving through standing water.
Yeah.
I know you should avoid it if you can, but like, what's the actual risk?
The biggest danger is water getting into the engine's air intake.
Oh, why is that bad?
If water gets sucked into the engine, it can cause it to hydrolock.
Hydrolock, what does it even mean?
So hydrolocking happens when water enters the engine's cylinders and it gets compressed by the pistons.
Okay.
And unlike air, which is compressible, water is basically incompressible.
Oh.
So when the piston tries to compress the water, it can't move.
Uh-oh.
And that creates a tremendous amount of force that can damage the engine.
Oh, wow.
It can bend connecting rods, damage the crankshaft, even crack the engine block.
Oh, wow. So that's like a really serious problem.
Yeah, hydrolocking can cause severe engine damage that often requires a complete engine rebuild or replacement.
Oh, wow. So we definitely don't want to be doing that.
Yeah.
How do you even know, like, if it's safe to drive through water?
Well, the general rule of thumb is to avoid driving through water that's deeper than the bottom of your car doors.
Okay.
But if you're unsure about the depth, it's always best to err on the side of caution and find another route.
Okay. So if in doubt, turn around.
Exactly.
All right. And finally, let's talk about something that might seem obvious, but I think it's worth emphasizing, and that's skipping regular maintenance.
Yeah.
Why is regular maintenance so important?
Regular maintenance is absolutely crucial for keeping your engine running smoothly and preventing costly repairs down the road.
What?
It's like preventative medicine for your car.
What kind of things are we talking about here besides like oil changes?
Well, make sure your engine air filter is clean,
Yeah.
because a dirty air filter can restrict airflow to the engine,
Okay.
and that can reduce power and fuel efficiency.
Gotcha.
You also want to make sure your spark plugs are replaced periodically.
Okay.
Worn spark plugs can cause misfires, rough idling, and reduced fuel economy.
Okay. And what about the cooling system?
The cooling system is also very important. You want to make sure you have the coolant flushed and replaced according to the manufacturer's recommendations.
Okay.
And you also want to inspect the radiator hoses regularly for any cracks or leaks.
So basically just regular checkups are really important.
Yeah, think of it like going to the doctor for a checkup.
Right.
It helps you catch problems early and prevent them from becoming more serious.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And it can save you a lot of money in the long run.
All right. So we've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
but there's still so much more to unpack.
There is.
So let's take a quick break.
Sounds good.
And when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into the science behind these engine stressing habits and explore some practical tips for avoiding them.
Let's do it.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about a lot of these engine stressing habits, and I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into like the actual science behind some of them. Um, so, for example, we talked about low RPM driving and how lugging the engine can reduce oil pressure and cooling efficiency. But like, how does that actually work? What's going on in the engine?
Well, the oil pump in your engine is driven by the crankshaft. So the faster the crankshaft spins, the faster the oil pump operates, and that means higher oil pressure,
Okay.
which is what you need to make sure all the moving parts are getting properly lubricated.
So if the engine's at a lower RPM, the oil pump's just not working as hard.
Exactly. And this becomes a problem when the engine's under load because the demand for lubrication increases.
So it's like trying to power a big machine with a weak battery.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
It might work for a little while, but eventually something's going to give.
Right. And the same principle applies to the cooling system.
Oh.
The water pump, which circulates the coolant through the engine, is also driven by the crankshaft.
Okay.
So as the engine speed increases, so does the flow rate of coolant.
So more coolant means more cooling.
Exactly. And this is crucial for maintaining the right engine temperature, especially when it's working hard.
So basically driving at low RPMs under load is like a double whammy.
Yeah, you're not getting enough lubrication and you're not getting enough cooling.
And that leads to wear and tear on the engine.
Right.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about engine braking.
Okay.
We talked about how it's important to do it smoothly, but I'm curious about like the impact on the transmission.
Uh-huh.
Is it actually bad for your transmission to engine brake a lot?
Well, there's a common misconception that engine braking will wear out your transmission's synchros.
Yeah.
But that's not really the whole story.
Good.
The synchros in your transmission are what synchronize the speeds of the gears before they engage,
Okay.
which allows for smooth gear changes.
Right.
Now, engine braking does involve downshifting more frequently than normal driving, but it's not inherently harmful to the synchros as long as you're doing it right.
Okay, so once again, it's how you do it.
Exactly. If you downshift too abruptly or into too low of a gear,
You can put stress on those synchros, and that can lead to premature wear.
so it's the same as before, smooth and gradual.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about revving a cold engine.
Right.
I think we all know it's bad, but like, how bad is it really?
It's worse than you might think.
Really?
Even a few seconds of revving a cold engine can have a cumulative effect over time.
Oh, wow.
When the engine is cold, the oil is thick and it doesn't flow easily.
Right.
That means the critical engine components, like the bearings and camshafts, aren't getting the lubrication they need.
So it's kind of like starting a workout without stretching.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Like, so you might not feel it right away, but you could injure yourself.
Exactly.
Right.
And the same thing can happen to your engine.
So even though I might not hear anything bad happening when I rev a cold engine, it could still be doing damage.
That's right.
Okay. Another thing I wanted to talk about was high gear acceleration.
Okay.
So we talked about how it can put stress on the engine and transmission. But why is that? It all comes down to leverage.
Okay.
The gears in your transmission act like levers, allowing the engine to apply force to the wheels.
Right.
Lower gears provide more mechanical advantage, meaning the engine can produce more torque, which is what gets your car moving.
So it's like using a wrench.
Yeah, exactly.
Longer wrench is easier to use.
Right. And when you accelerate in a high gear, you're essentially using a shorter wrench.
Okay.
So the engine has to work much harder to produce the same amount of torque.
That makes sense.
So even though higher gears are more fuel efficient for cruising, they're not ideal for hard acceleration.
So basically use the right gear for the situation.
Right.
Lower gear for acceleration, higher gear for cruising.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about fluid leaks.
All right.
I mean, obviously leaks are bad,
Yeah.
but like, how did they even happen in the first place?
Well, there are a lot of different reasons why a fluid leak might occur.
Okay.
It could be something as simple as a loose connection or a worn out seal, or it could be something more serious like a damaged component or corrosion.
So it's not always like a major problem.
Right. But it's always a good idea to get it checked out.
Yeah, because even a small leak can turn into a big problem.
Exactly.
All right. Let's go back to overheating for a second.
Okay.
We talked about the dangers of ignoring it,
Right.
but like what actually happens inside the engine when it overheats?
Well, when an engine overheats, the metal components expand,
Okay.
and they can expand beyond their normal tolerances.
Right.
This can cause the pistons to seize in the cylinders,
Oh.
the cylinder heads to warp, or even the engine block to crack.
So it's like a pressure cooker.
Yeah, it is.
And you don't want it to explode.
Exactly. And the damage can be very expensive to repair.
So we really want to avoid overheating at all costs.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about driving through standing water.
Okay.
We know it's risky,
Yeah.
but are there certain things that make it more risky than others?
Yeah. So the depth of the water is obviously a factor, but the speed you're driving at also matters.
Oh, so the faster you're going, the worse it is.
Exactly. The faster you're going, the more force the water has.
Oh, wait.
And the more likely it is to get into the engine.
So even if it's not that deep, if you're going too fast,
Yeah.
you can still have a problem,
Right.
right? So the lesson is slow down.
Exactly.
Okay. Finally, let's talk about regular maintenance.
All right.
We all know we should do it,
They should.
but like, why is it so important for the engine?
Well, think of it like this regular maintenance is like preventative medicine for your car.
Okay.
Just like regular checkups and screenings can help you stay healthy.
Right.
Regular maintenance can help keep your car running smoothly and prevent major problems.
So it's not just about fixing problems that already exist.
Right? It's about catching those problems early
Okay.
and preventing them from becoming bigger problems.
So it's like getting regular dental checkups.
Exactly.
You know, you don't wait until you have a toothache to go to the dentist.
Right. You go regularly to prevent those problems from happening in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the same goes for your car.
All right, so I think we've covered a lot of the science behind these engine stressing habits.
I think so.
Now I want to get into like what we can actually do about it.
Sure.
So in the next segment, we'll explore some practical tips and strategies for breaking these habits and keeping our engines healthy.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're back. And we've talked about the science behind all these engine stressing habits. Now let's get into like the actual practical stuff. What can we do to avoid doing these things?
Right. Let's talk about solutions.
So where do we even begin?
Well, I think the first step is awareness. You know, we talked about lugging the engine, but a lot of drivers don't even realize they're doing it.
So how can we be more aware of it? Like,
Yeah.
what should we be paying attention to?
Pay attention to how your engine feels and sounds.
Okay.
If you feel it vibrating or struggling, especially when you're accelerating or going uphill, you might be lugging it.
So it's not just about the RPMs. It's about like actually feeling it.
Exactly. Listen to your engine.
And what else can we do to avoid lugging?
Be mindful of your gear selection. You know, don't be afraid to downshift. If you need more power, downshift.
Yes, if you feel like the engine's working too hard, just downshift.
Exactly.
Okay. What about engine braking? We talked how to do it smoothly, but how do we make sure we're not doing it too much?
The key is to anticipate your braking needs and downshift gradually.
Okay.
Don't wait till the last second to downshift
Right.
because that can make the engine rev too high.
So it's all about planning ahead.
Exactly.
Okay. Now revving a cold engine, you know, it's bad, but it's so tempting to do sometimes, especially on a cold morning.
I know, it is tempting, but you got to resist that urge.
So how do we do that?
Well, for one thing, you got to change your mindset. Think of warming up your engine as like a little ritual,
Okay.
a time to appreciate your car.
Yeah.
And while the engine's warming up, you can do other things like check your mirrors, adjust your seat, listen to some music.
That's a good point.
You know, just make use of that time.
All right. High gear acceleration.
Yeah.
We know it's not good, but sometimes you got to do it. Like if you're merging onto a highway or something.
Yeah.
What's the best way to handle those situations?
It's better to downshift and accelerate smoothly than to lug the engine in a high gear.
Okay. So even if it feels a little jerky,
It's better for your engine.
it's worth it.
Exactly.
Okay. Fluid leaks. What can we do to prevent those?
Regular inspections are really important.
Okay.
You know, just take a look under your car every once in a while.
Like actively look for leaks.
Exactly. You don't want to wait till you see a puddle on the ground.
Right.
Catch those leaks early.
Okay. Overheating. We talked about how to address it if it happened.
Yeah.
But how can we prevent it in the first place?
Well, maintaining a healthy cooling system is crucial.
Okay.
Make sure your coolant level is topped off
Um,
and have the cooling system flushed and refilled according to the manufacturer's recommendations.
all right. So regular maintenance.
Exactly.
What else?
Inspect your radiator hoses for cracks or leaks.
Okay.
And if you see any, have them replaced.
All right. So those hoses are important.
They are.
And what about the thermostat?
Yeah. The thermostat can also cause overheating if it's not working properly.
So if we're having problems with overheating, that's something to check.
Exactly.
Okay. Driving through standing water. We know it's bad, but sometimes you just can't avoid it.
Right.
What should we do if we have to drive through standing water?
If you have to drive through it, slow down.
Okay.
Go really slow.
So like slower than you think you need to.
Yes. The slower you go, the less likely you are to get water in the engine.
Okay?
Yeah.
And if we're not sure if it's safe,
Just don't do it.
find another route.
Exactly. Better safe than sorry.
All right. And finally, regular maintenance. I mean, I know it's important, but sometimes it's easy to forget about.
It is.
What are some tips for staying on top of it?
Set reminders on your phone
Oh,
or in your calendar.
just like a doctor's appointment. And I guess it's a good idea to have a good relationship with your mechanic.
Yeah, if you trust your mechanic, you're more likely to take their advice.
Right. And if you're not sure about something, ask.
Exactly. Communication is key.
All right. So that's about it for this deep dive into engine stressing habits.
Yeah, we covered a lot.
Hopefully everyone listening learned something new
I hope so.
and will start treating their engines a little bit better.
Yeah, your car will thank you for it.
And your wallet will thank you for it.
Absolutely.
So until next time, keep those engines running smoothly.
And keep on diving deep.